Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the finalists for the big awards have been announced, and the Dodgers have two finalists in those. We'll talk about that. We'll get into Trea Turner and a video that is agency released for free agency, and we'll talk about fans during the postseason. And that's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans, welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. We are Locked On Dodgers, and we're here for you every weekday morning, wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. You can find us simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers and make it easy on yourself and subscribe in all those places and never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Samperio, and if your first time listening or watching all happened in the last week, you might not know who I am, but I'm back. I was traveling for my day job covering the World Series, and while it didn't end how maybe we wanted it to, it was still, a cool experience. I can't complain. But I am a lifelong Dodger fan that does this podcast with my co-host, Jeff Snider, who gets a night off, well-deserved night off because he had to cover for me this last week. So shout out to Jeff. We're both lifelong Dodger fans, both cover the Dodgers in a variety of ways, both continue to cover the Dodgers. One of those ways being this podcast. And we're here every weekday morning for you, Monday through Friday, bringing you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue. And while there's not any major Dodger news, free agency is technically underway, although it's right now it's just the exclusive window for teams to talk to their free agents. Nothing has happened on the Dodgers side. The Mets did sign Edwin Diaz to a 5-year deal over $100 million. There's been a small trade between the Rockies and Braves. But other than that, that's really the only stuff that's happened after Thursday or on Thursday. And then free agency kind of officially opens and maybe things start happening there. But I don't really know how this offseason is going to go because, last offseason we had the looming lockout. So it was either get your deal done early or wait until who knows when. So there was a lot of deals done earlier than rather than later. But in years past, free agency had kind of taken a little bit of a lull in these days and kind of pushed in more into late December, early January type of thing. So I really have no idea how this offseason is going to go. But either way, we're going to be here covering it for you. If the Dodgers do anything, if other teams do anything that might affect the Dodgers and things like that. And we'll definitely keep talking about potential free agents or potential trades that are out there that the Dodgers can do in order to improve on their team. But let's talk about awards. Award season is upon us. It starts off next week. They'll start announcing all the major awards: Manager of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Cy Young, MVP. The Dodgers have two finalists, although I don't think they'll have any winners in those groups. Dave Roberts is a finalist for Manager of the Year, and Julio Urías is is a finalist for NL Cy Young. All that does is guarantee that they finish top three. For Julio, it was Max Fried, Julio, and Sandy Alcantara, which for me leads me to believe that Julio is going to finish second. I definitely think, in all the time we've talked about, Julio and his candidacy for Cy Young and everything else, I don't think anyone really talked about Max Fried. And while Max Fried's numbers are pretty decent, I don't Julio has some of the better counting stats. And once you get in a combination of that plus everything else, Max Fried also threw 185 innings. So he's not, quite up there in innings. His ERA was 2.48, had a FIP of 2.70. So while he had a good season, I think Julio finishes second. And kind of rightfully so. Jeff and I both had different episodes talking about this and his candidacy. And, while leading the league in ERA is great, the huge discrepancy in innings between Sandy and Julio was just too much to make up, especially considering that Sandy's ERA was still very good despite that huge discrepancy in innings. And while it didn't lead the league in ERA, it was something that was still good and was still strong. Definitely strong enough to win. Cy Young. So for Julio, he'll finish second in Cy Young, I would imagine. And it's one of those things with him is, you know, it's can he take one more step? And that's where I think the big question comes into play, especially with Walker Buehler out next year and the Dodgers kind of deciding or no need to figure out what they can bring. Is can Julio be your number one on a World Series contending team? Or World Series contending. Obviously, the Dodgers were technically World Series contenders, although they did lose in the first round of the playoffs. But it's a matter of, can he be your number one, or is he more slated at this point to be a number two? And I guess it just depends how you feel. Now, obviously, a guy that had an ERA of 2.16 last 2 years, wins aren't a big deal, but he had good numbers and high win totals last years. One of those years being inflated by having a really good offense around him in 2021. Last year, more so about his run prevention, a whip of .96. You know, he's a guy that prevents runs. And while you want to say it doesn't matter how he prevents runs, we know when you think about an ace, and maybe it does matter a little bit more. Julio had more innings pitched and strikeouts, which is usually not a sign, which is usually not a sign of, quote unquote bona fide ace. You would usually see more strikeouts and innings. Then that's usually how they dominate. Julio dominates in a different sense. And for the Dodgers, it's a question of do they believe it? And I honestly believe the Dodgers think that Julio can be a number one on a World Series contending team, a World Series, prospecting team. Although I do think he is maybe better suited for that number two role. And he had it perfectly right there with Walker Buehler kind of serving as that number one. Unfortunately, Walker Buehler will be out. And now it's a matter of, do the Dodgers go after a number one type, or do they just fill in everywhere else behind him? And, you look at the Phillies, and the Phillies had, Wheeler and Nola, who are very good 1-2s, but realistically, Wheeler can be a number one on a lot of teams, but when you think about a number one, I don't know, how many names you name before Zach Wheeler comes up. You look at the Astros on the other end, they had a Cy Young, probably the Cy Young winner, and Justin Verlander as their number one. And then a pretty strong number two in Framber Valdez, who set a record for most quality starts in a row. So, it's all a matter of how you construct your team. If you're built more on offense, which the Dodgers could have said they were this last year, and that one doesn't matter as much. For me, Julio doesn't go deep enough into games, not by his own fault. I would like to see him maybe be allowed to go a little bit deeper into games. Although the Dodgers do things for a reason, and it's to not get burnt out at the end of the season. But at some point, you got to let guys throw and see what they can do and figure things out. And I do think now, with that said, I think that's what they got to do. I think they got to figure out, is he an ace or not, and or you know I don't know. I don't think the Dodgers are doing this, but if you keep Julio as a two-time, 2.5, 3-time through a lineup guy, 6 innings, kind of topped out, you do lower his value when he does hit the free agent market. I would say, not by a lot, but it does hurt him a little bit because teams don't genuinely know, can this guy be an ace, or is this guy just a solid number two or a number one on a decent team. So, whatever the case is, but Julio's going to finish second in Cy Young. He's become the guy that we thought when the Dodgers signed him. If you would have said that Julio Urías is going to be a perennial Cy Young candidate, you would have been like, yeah, I would hope for that. And if you would have said Julio was going to help the Dodgers bring home their first World Series title since '88, you'd be like, yeah, I would hope so. And that's exactly what he's done. And now he's starting to reap the rewards, on a national level. But I do struggle to kind of hold him up there as a true number one on a team where you really, unless you have to have a strong, rest of your time, or a strong bullpen, or a strong offense. And the Dodgers did have all that, and it didn't quite work out. And his, playoff start left a little bit to be desired. But I think the Dodgers are going to go after a upper tier arm this offseason, and it's not because of Julio, but it's just because that's kind of what you need in order to have some playoff success. From what we've seen, the more arms you have, the better. And to have Julio starting in the game too just makes your team overall better. So that's where we're at there. Let's move on. Let's talk about Trea Turner, whose agency dropped a video, and it was interesting. First, let's talk about BetOnline, because BetOnline is the number one source for all your sports betting info and analysis. Get all the stats, get all the news there at betonline.net. Get the latest odds trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer to esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix, or not we, they are, betonline.net. So head to the website, betonline.net.com on your laptop. No, betonline.net, no .com. Betonline.net on your laptop or mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so like I mentioned, Trea Turner's agency released a video that was all about Trea Turner and narrated by John Hamm, and it was essentially a pitch for teams to sign Trea Turner to a long-term deal and give him a lot of money. And it was interesting. Um, I'll say candidly, my thoughts were this is kind of weird, and not, I don't know, weird is the right word, but this is slightly cringe. It was, I don't know. It was just, I guess it's because we're not used to seeing this now. 100% believing in that agencies or whoever do this every single year when they're pitching free agents. Um, it just never really released to the public. And now that it is released to the public, it's kind of like, that's interesting, I guess is the main word I would want to use for it. It went over, his stats, and I think inflated his defense a little bit in the wording, and how this is, a lot of the stuff that we've heard about Trea Turner is that, a lot of his hits are infield hits, and that's not going to be sustainable once he gets older because he's going to get a little bit slower. Um, the video rest assures that Trea Turner's talent and skills are sustainable and will continue to be part of him for a long time. The biggest omission was they mentioned the fact that Trea Turner has won a World Series. They mentioned the fact that Trea Turner has been in the postseason for 5 straight years. What they didn't mention was that Trea Turner has a career 614 OPS in the postseason. So I'm actually surprised they didn't play up the fact that Trea Turner had a couple home runs in the NLDS this year. But even with that happening, Trea Turner's career OPS in the postseason is 614. That was not mentioned in the video. And yeah, it was. If you want to watch the video, it's on YouTube, or I've seen it on Twitter a few places. I would imagine just type in Trea Turner CAA, I think is his agency, and you can watch it. And it's interesting to me because all these teams, or most of these teams, have departments, analytic departments, they have scouting departments, they have front offices that have any uh, any bit of available information to them with the click of a button and everything else. And seeing this like, to me, it's just like, what president of baseball operations or what general manager or what front office is gonna be on the fence about Trea Turner and then watch this video and be like, oh man, we really need to sign Trea Turner. Like, you either want to sign Trea Turner or you don't. You either want to give Trea Turner 200, 250, $300 million, or you don't. I don't know. For me, it just felt like you're opening up Trea Turner for unnecessary, not ridicule. But you're just opening him up for, like, if he doesn't do well, this video is very easy to find, cut up, and whatever, and put out there on social media to make fun of him. So, and it's also, I can understand now. We just spoke about awards and award season. Not as much in Major League Baseball, but I've seen it more so in other sports. Although the Marlins did send out a package for Sandy this year, of teams or agencies or whoever sending out types of packages, videos, whatever, when they want their guy to be considered for an award. We've seen slogans or whatever for guys in the mostly NBA, but you've seen it in MLB before too, or a team or someone will send out something on behalf of a player in order to and to the writers that are voting for these awards. That's understandable. You know, a random writer that lives in or covers the Twins might not see Sandy Alcantara on a every night base or every start basis. He might see him once in a while, or if he plays the Twins, or you might notice a name. So then sending a video or a package or stats or whatever for the awareness makes a lot more sense. But like I said, for Trea Turner and for MLB and for MLB front offices, these guys know everything. They can look up every stat. They can look up everything that was in the video that's factual. They can decide on their own if some of the statements made in there are factual or more opinion based, and they can make that decision. I just don't know what this actual video does for. I don't know. It was just funny. Obviously, as an agency, you're trying to do everything you can to help your client out. And if they believe that this video is something that can help their client out, then yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But it was just, to me, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. It was just funny. Like, Andrew Friedman's going to watch this video and all of a sudden be inspired to, oh, I want to spend 275 mil on Trea Turner now. Like, no, they know what their number is for Trea Turner. I would imagine most teams that are going to be interested in him have their number in mind, have their idea in mind, and I don't think this video is going to do anything. Now when they start meeting, face to face meetings can definitely change it. We've seen that happen before, where guys go in and either they really love the player or the player ends up really loving the area and the front office and everyone else, and that's kind of how those come to fruition. But I just don't know what the video does for it. I did see a lot of people saying, "Oh, that means he's gone." Trea Turner's was going to test free agency regardless. Once the Dodgers before the season said they weren't going to offer him, they didn't even offer him an extension. You kind of figured, okay, well, he's for sure testing free agency. The way the season kind of ended and everything else, and just from lack of reporting and everything else, everything has basically said Trea Turner's going to test free agency and probably going to leave. Now, he walked back the East Coast comment because he said it was for the net when the Nationals were going to trade him, that he kind of wanted to stay on the East Coast. Obviously, that didn't end up working out anyways. He walked back the East Coast comment. He did ingratiate himself with the team more in the second year than he did that first year, and he did, speak candidly about it, how it was hard to come in and adjust to that team and everything else. And you can see the first year he didn't look comfortable; he looked more like a hired gun. And then this last year he did look more comfortable and part of the team. And he started the Wolf of Wall Street celebration and everything else, so he was part of it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just don't see him coming back to the Dodgers for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons being the Dodgers. I don't know if that's the guy they want to invest in. Not saying Trea Turner's not the right guy to invest in, but um, yeah, I just I just feel like it was the writings on the wall that he's going to go sign somewhere else. And who knows? Maybe this video saves him. Maybe Andrew Friedman and Brandon Gomes are just watching this video on a loop, saying, "Go get Trea Turner. Let's talk to him now. We got till Thursday before other teams have a chance at him." Although I don't think that's what's going to happen. So that's it on Trea Turner. Yeah, free agency. Like I said, after Thursday, every team can talk to every player. Right now, only the team whose the player was on last season can talk to him. Although I don't see too many moves being made on the Dodgers front or even on regular baseball front. But who knows? We'll see. That's all we got there. I'm going to talk about. So I got to go to Philadelphia. Got to go to Houston, and I saw a lot of stuff on social media and people talking or asking me and trying to compare the crowds to Dodger Stadium. And I have some thoughts on that. So I'm going to share those thoughts. But first, just a quick reminder to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. And for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports today. They got the games that matter, from the biggest stories in sports to the games that matter the most. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. All right. So I went to Philadelphia, or started in Houston game one, went to Philadelphia for games three, four, five, and then back in Houston for game six. I also went to San Diego for the games against Dodgers and the first game of the NLCS, and obviously Dodger Stadium for the two games they played there. And, from talking to people and seeing on social media, the Dodgers crowd or crowd noise got a little bit of slander this October, and I'm not going to say rightfully so, but I will say there's big differences in terms of everything going on. So I'll start it with saying yes, Philadelphia was loud. Yeah, actually, yes, Philadelphia was loud. Houston was very loud during game six, which makes sense because they were about to clinch. And San Diego was against the Dodgers more so, but also into that game one against the Phillies. San Diego was surprisingly very loud and had a great electric atmosphere. I will admit all three of those places had a better atmosphere than Dodger Stadium did this season in the first two games of the NLDS. Now, does that mean I think their fans are better in general? Pump the brakes on that, not so much. But what I think has happened, and maybe I don't know, rightfully so, but Dodger fans have seen the playoffs 10 straight years. Other than 2020, when you had to go to Texas if you wanted to see them, they've had multiple home games at Dodger Stadium for the last nine of the last 10 years. Um, and if I don't, for me, it's if you expect a fan base to be wild and crazy and, you know, deathly loud for an NLDS game 10 years in a row, I'm not going to expect that from a team, from a fan base. And people, I've seen people say before, like, oh, Dodgers, like NLDS. I mean, this year, obviously against the Padres, it was a little different. But even then, I still don't feel Dodger fans were respecting the NLDS, because if they did, I do think we would have seen more Dodger fans in San Diego. They would have paid the ridiculous prices to go on secondary markets to go to San Diego. And there just wasn't much Dodger representation there. And I do think it's a matter of, as a Dodger fan, you only have so much money to give to this team. And it's a matter of, okay, do I want to spend, 30% of that money I have earmarked for October on an NLDS game, or do I want to save it for a potential NLCS or World Series game? And I've been in that boat before. Now I'm lucky I get to go for work and it won't matter. But you know, there was a point where I went 2015, 2016, 2017. So I went almost three postseasons without going to a Dodger playoff game, because after 2014, game one of the NLCS, whatever it was against Cardinals, where the Dodgers were up 7-2, Kershaw had that bad seventh inning, Baez gave up the home run, and the Dodgers lost 9-8. After that game, I said, I'm never going to another Dodger playoff game until a World Series. And in my lifetime, I had gone to playoff games in 2008, 2009, 2013, and then 2014. And I didn't. I didn't go to 2015 against the Mets. I didn't go 2016 against the Nationals and the Cubs. I didn't go 2017. I didn't go up until Game 6 of the World Series. And if you're a Dodger fan, that's kind of how you might feel every year at this point, where I don't want to spend money on these early series. I'm going to save the money for a potential World Series. And I do think if the Dodgers were to make a World Series here in the next few years, that the atmosphere would be just as loud, just as crazy, just as wild, and getting just as much praise as some of these other cities were. Now, the Phillies, Philly fans in general are already, given a label, and the label is pretty diehard, pretty strong, uh, but also, maybe a little bit, nasty at times, or whatever the case is. But they hadn't been to the playoffs in over 10 years, or 10 years, whatever it was, over 10 years. So yeah, take take the 2013 NLDS, or even then it was only a few years, but Take the 2013 NLDS, and I'm sure it was a lot louder than the 2022 NLDS because the Dodgers hadn't been there since 2009. This year, the Dodgers hadn't been there since 2021. Like it was just 1 year difference. So, Philly was obviously going to be loud. And then as they kept winning and the city kept growing, the city's love for it kept growing. Yeah, it was loud. I can't compare the World Series loudness to like the NLDS or the NLCS because I wasn't there in Philly, but the World Series was loud. And for an outdoor venue, one of the loudest ones I've heard in a while. But that's not saying that the Dodgers can't get that loud or haven't been that loud. 2016 World Series or 2017 Game 6 World Series was very loud. I can't really compare because that's a long time in between, but it was very loud. And I'm sure, 2018 World Series was very loud. And I think now for the Dodgers, NLDS, NLCS is not going to be anything, out of this world, mind blowing, game changing in terms of crowd. They're going to be it's going to be a strong, loud crowd every time, but I don't think it's going to be like, oh my God, to where people are praising it. But I do think if the Dodgers make it back to a World Series, I do think that crowd is going to bring it because, 2017 World Series, they brought it, but then even Game 7, after that first inning, it was kind of just not that great the rest of the game. I will admit that. But, we were all down. We were down 5-0. The Dodgers, after the like 3 or 4 innings, the Dodgers had given up a bunch of run scoring opportunities. It was one of those things where, man, this sucks. 2018, I wasn't there, but I would imagine it was loud. That 18 inning game, was loud. When Puig hit that home run, the stadium was going crazy in Game 4. They ended up losing, and then they ended up losing the next day. That was kind of writing on the wall. The Red Sox were a better team that year. 2020 World Series, the Dodgers made it, won it, but weren't at Dodger Stadium. So I think the lack of World Series has prevented the Dodgers from having that crowd that people talk about. And I do think if the Dodgers get back to it, they'll be in it. Um, yeah, and then like Houston was loud, but Houston's indoors, so it's a little bit of a false feeling sometimes. But it was loud, I will say. It's kind of interesting how like at least I don't know if it's all iPhones or maybe my iPhone or the way I hold it, it suppresses the noise a little bit. So I posted the video of the final out from Houston, and it doesn't sound that loud, but it was loud over there. So I don't know. It was just an interesting. I don't know if it's my iPhone the way I hold it or whatever, or if I need to have a little boom mic. I don't know, but it was loud. I will say it was loud. Houston had a pretty great crowd. The Phillies had a great crowd, and for other teams having great crowds, I don't think that should become slander for Dodger crowds because, like I said, candidly speaking, the Dodger fans are spoiled now. I'm there. Are you going to get up for NLDS? Are you going to get up for NLCS? Not as much. Are you going to, yeah, you're going to go crazy in the big spots, but I don't know if you're going to have that sustained energy throughout a game. But I do think if the Dodgers make the World Series, they will have that sustained energy throughout the game because at this point, the anticipation for the World Series continues to grow the further we get away from it. 2020, everyone has different feelings about 2020, but the further we get away from that and, everything else and seeing the Astros win after them cheating out the Dodgers in 2017, there's going to be more growing anticipation. And I do think that's where every fan base gets, their stuff from is from anticipation or seeing something they haven't seen in a while. San Diego was ridiculously loud and crazy, and I've never seen Petco like that before. But they hadn't hosted a playoff game with fans since 2006, and they were playing the Dodgers, who they had become rivals in at least in their minds, and maybe now a little bit more on the field. And they were actively trying to prevent Dodger fans from going. So it was a good combination of everything. Philadelphia hadn't been there in forever, and then Astro fans have the us against the world type mentality, and they have their loudness from that. So, and they also wanted to win one, not to vindicate the 2017 title, but just to solidify that they did win one without cheating, or at least so far as we know. And I don't think they did. I think they were just a really good team. So that's what I got on crowds. Don't slander Dodger fans too much. We're a little bit spoiled, and I do think the Dodgers still have great crowds. On a night in, night out basis, the Dodgers have some of the best crowds in baseball. When it comes to postseason, They leave a little bit to be desired sometimes, but hey, that's just the nature of what it is. And I do think when the Dodger fans need to show up, they show up, and that's how it goes. So that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On Sports today for your second listen. They got the biggest stories in sports and all the games that matter. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts that only Locked On can provide. Available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. You can find us on those places wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers, which is also how you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find Jeff on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts if you need to get a hold of us. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, tell your smart device, play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree, you just have to listen. Have a good one.